Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this morning's episode. Bookmarking Conception in Life. And can sight even own anything? Before I dive into the subtitle, I have to explain the title and what I mean. I wrote a sentence down here before I started the episode. I wrote, "A topic can be perceived till the end of time. We must bookmark conception through our useful understanding, or through the utility of our understanding." And so what I mean by this is that, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world in front of our eyes, let me speak about that, where in front of our eyes the sky has no edge. When the sky has no edge, the empty space provides for new perceptions, provides new angles. A person, let's say we have person A and person B, and person A sees person B, and one day person A thinks person B is such a bad person, and then the next day, person A thinks person B is the best person, And one day, the person A may think person B is brainless, There may be a day where person A thinks person B is, for example, brave, And the whole idea is that when we see something in a changing space-time continuum where the edge of the universe is not visible, there's more than one way to see something. Something I personally do is that because everything can be gone into, you can look at an object, you can look at a concept and add endless context to it. That means you can see a concept through multiple contexts, or you could see one context to multiple concepts, And so the bookmark is where we stop off with the inner vision of a concept. That means if somebody, what's an example of this? Let's say somebody talks about I don't know. I mean, let me see an example, a proper example of this. Let's say we have the concept of flight. Let's say somebody wants to understand flight, the concept of flight. That's a concept, and let's say somebody, when understanding a concept, pretty much there's three states or three spaces where we can look at it. We can look at something from the past, what it meant in the past, what the concept means in the present, and in some sense what the concept is going to mean in the future. Now the same thing can apply for the context, where we wonder about what was the background story to the world before there were characters in regards to the past. So the context can be perceived from the past, from the present, and from the future. Any situation where there is a concept and a context, this can be applied. Time is pretty much a three-dimensional lens, poetically. So let's say you're someone and you want to learn the idea of flight, And so you go into the past and you read about the Wright brothers, You look at the present, and let's say you look at the past and you see that it's like the earliest airplanes didn't exist. And what I mean by that is, the more you go back into the past, flight belonged only to bird life and insect life. And supposedly dinosaur life as well. But human beings, so if you want to understand flight in the past, you would be looking at a bird. If you were to understand the concept of flight in the present, you would look at an airplane engine, aerospace engineering. And then if you were to look at it in the future, you might see flight beyond the physical concept. You might see the flight of mind into cyberspace, the flight of nature into the artificial, or the flight of a species into the void. Do you see? So what I mean is that we look at at an object and we contextualize it. That's what I mean by you got to bookmark concepts in life, or they could endlessly update. That means imagine a person gets to spend 3 days with another person, and in those 3 days, one day that person is good, one day that person is bad, one day they're neutral. And the person's like, what kind of impression should I have of this person? Ultimately, based on what you want to do, you choose the type of concepts you see. So you can say that the mind is building the context and the body is conceptually experiencing it. So, there is no way a human being can understand everything. There is no way the human brain, this couple-pound flesh, can be a big enough poetically USB storage device. And I don't remember the exact number. Somebody was saying let me look this up. There is a sort of voltage to every cell of our body. Somebody was saying that a single cell has a sort of voltage. And imagine all the cells in your body, and imagine all those Qigong masters who had access to dormant reserves of energy. You see, our understanding is limited to our experiential exploration and ideological noticing. That means we're creatures pretty much that either directly experience things or indirectly idolize them, And this is probably a word that is not in the English language, but ideas. We can subjectify the moment, we can objectify the moment. I'm pretty much saying when it comes to the inner realms and the subjective dimensions, a person can look at something so deeply, but eventually they have to decide on how it relates to them. A lot of children are, for example, going to the educational system not realizing that it is their responsibility, that whatever the teacher writes down on the paper, that they got to put into the framework of their worldview. You see, every person eventually in this life, if you're conscious and and are open to communication, or have evolved to communicate, understanding means we're standing under an infinitely existent universal activity. When I look at this life, when I was younger, I was content with my own certainty when I was younger. That means if I felt I knew something, I felt I knew everything about it. But it took me a while to realize that you cannot learn a changing system. There's nothing to learn about it aside from change being observed, but you can be a changing system. And right now, we human beings, we're pretty much a part of the earth that has separated from the earth, started walking on the earth, noticed itself walking on the earth, began creating a subdimensional level of articulation through thought. That means after the objective evolution, I speak about a subjective evolution. In schools, they don't teach this. So anyways, a person has to, just like how we say goodbye to people, to our friends, let's say, when we're with them and then we leave, we say goodbye. When it comes to ideas or the inner realms or content about that relates to how speech is being expressed, I will tell you, man can greet and leave ideas as well. You know, this may sound strange, but a person can have an emotional attachment to an object, and a person can have an emotional attachment to a subject. And most people don't realize how the world is being a subject. We're just acknowledging the objective dimension. And without a thorough analysis or indexing of the whole universal sector or existential sector, we assume we are in reality. That means I'm just waiting for the future, where there may come a time where in the futures extraterrestrials land, and one of the extraterrestrials comes to humanity and says, "Hey, humanity, are you sure about what you're seeing?" Can you imagine? It's as if the extraterrestrials are telling humanity, "Are you sure about how human beings have finalized the meaning of the world?" And we will see that instead of being humble and starting from the unknown, we have declared knowledge as truth. Knowledge can never be truth. Knowledge can only be 50% of truth. That means it's so hilarious. All those people who want to know truth, they're only getting access to 50%. Because what if truth is 50% unknown? That means when I say unknown, not that there is something known in it we don't know, that it is the unknown. Do you see, all systems of thought want to close the search for the absolute. But I am saying, what if the absolute is not absolute? That means to us inside a sphere, our world is just this. But to those who are beyond the sphere, the world is not just this. And you know, an analogy that isn't used often is that you cannot learn anything in this life. We are sculpting our perception. That means we are perception sculptors, I would say, rather than human beings that are learning. What it is everybody starts off with a simulation. This simulation most people don't care about, because their life in their conscious waking state goes to just the body's film. As if the body is a film, the mind is a film. These two films are playing simultaneously. Certain moments of our life we're a creature of mind, for example in dream states, and certain times in the waking state we're a creature of body. But the body is inside the context of an intelligence. So what I'm trying to say is that in our inner realms, the mind's life, which is a film overlaid on the body, the mind's life cannot treat itself like a body, or it will suffer. That means if we want to see the soul objectively, or there's somebody who wants to, let's say, have proof of the soul objectively, by definition the soul can't be an object. It is that beyond it. As if metaphysics meant that which was after the physics. It's as if physics is studying the room you're in, and then metaphysics is wondering who's in it. I can go to the subtitle now, pretty much Bookmarking Conception in Life. Pretty much we hold life in a certain checkpoint that can connect to the main internal story. right? That means right now, as I'm speaking, my main internal story that I'm functioning through, even before giving this talk, is that I'm a human creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere. That's the basic, that's like the character in the world I am before I speak the talk. But at the same time, if the intelligence is not just from the character, there's a huge potential that the intelligence is in the world. And it's a way of saying it's as if we're identifying on a cellular level, so we feel we're among the many being one big thing. But if we identify as the whole system, it's as if a human being identifying again as the cells of their body, or is just the all of their cells combined being them. And to be honest, this is probably one of the hardest things to teach, that there is no teacher. That from the beginning of your life, your eyes have been your only leader. I remember, it's actually talk, I think, I actually forget the number, but there's one of these Mr.Within talks where I was in Iran in 2016 visiting my relatives, visiting my family, and when I was there, I was asked to speak. And I was very indirectly asked to speak. What that means is some people go into some moments wanting something, and some people go into some moments and they don't want anything, but that thing that is in the moment finds them. That means there has been times where I have found the microphone, just very few though, and there's been times where the microphone has found me. So this was one of those times in 2016 in Iran when the microphone found me. And I was attending this gathering, so it's something to tell people about the country Iran that many people don't know. First of all, Iran is a theocratical society, which means religion is in the law. So if you're born in that country, you're wearing a religious ideology as like the clothing for your mind. But there's also, of course, human levels of, dimensions of freedom as well. So what happens is there isn't a freedom to speak. There isn't ideological freedom in Iran, but I will tell you, people go into gatherings, and in those gatherings they talk about the deepest things and all the things that are not allowed to be spoken about, let's say, in public. And so anyways, I found myself in this gathering, and in this gathering there were different people coming and speaking, and I was the last person to speak. And I was asked to at the last second, But what it was that all those people who had come to speak, they had the term Ustad, which means master, in front of their name. So literally it's as if all those people who were talking were like, master this, master that, master A, master B, master C. Do you know what I mean? Like so all those people had the term master, and and the whole thing was, it was the idea of it was called Jalase Irfan. And so what it is like a metaphysical, discussion gathering. But nobody was talking about metaphysics, right? And it's understandable why, for example, in a theocratical society, you shouldn't talk about metaphysics. But, at the end, I found the microphone, in my hand. And the person looked at me and he's like, you got to wrap this up in 10 minutes. And I finished the talk in 8. I think it's 4:38. I could be wrong, but I think it's that episode on the channel. But anyways, so I go there, for the first time holding an actual, microphone in my hand and speaking to a room of, I think, was 40 people. And not all of them were listening, but I just started. And I remember what I said, how I ended that talk was that, that 8-minute talk was, at the last sentence I said was that was the last thing I ended it off with. I said that the only purpose of the outer guru is to make you realize that there is an inner guru, or you will be chasing, a stranger for your whole life. And I told them that your moment of being is your only guru, and it has been there with you from the beginning. And that's the point I wanted to make here. That our future started the past. And so when we get to the future, we also get to the truth of the past. Okay guys, so my attention has come to the chat section. Welcome everybody. Feel free to ask any question or write any comment. I don't get hurt by language. Jeff H says, do you feel our creator is trying to constantly get closer and in touch with us? Yeah. Okay. So you're okay. So guys, I'm reading the chat section. Jeff brings up an interesting point. Let me find a more relaxed song to speak over. Okay. Okay. All right. So first, Jeff, I'm going to answer your question, then I'll get to your second comment. So Jeff says, do you feel our creator is trying to constantly get closer and in touch with us? There is a picture that Michelangelo drew on the Sistine Chapel called The Creation of Adam. And Michelangelo drew this on a ceiling. That means imagine how hard drawing is on like a table, Now imagine you have to draw something on a ceiling. So if you look at this picture, Jeff, what you're saying in the chat section is exactly this picture that Michelangelo drew. Here it is. This is not the full picture, but I don't know why. But let me see if I can find the full picture. There we go. The traditional view of God, and especially in the Abrahamic traditions, if you look at this picture, you will notice God is very close to man, and God's finger is trying to touch Adam. But if you look at the picture of Adam, Adam's elbow is on his knee, and Adam actually doesn't see God. That means God sees man, but man doesn't see God from the theological standpoint. And there's this sage called Kabir. He says, many know that the drop merges into the ocean, but few know that the ocean merges into the drop. That means many know that individual consciousness is going towards a collectively conscious state, but very few know that the collective consciousness is coming towards the individual. And if the future is a collective being, that collective being is as if trying to remind the drop that it is in the ocean. This could be the case. It could be, you can say that the universe is trying to make us remember it before we remember ourselves. Or another way of saying it is like the universe is trying to make us remember that the whole universe is our body, is our whole self. But this is the theological perspective, and for me, there's something different when it comes to the creator. There was a time in my life where, especially in my youth, I would pray, and the prayer was not a robotic prayer. It was just a sincere moment where I was asking the universe for what my inner realms expected out of the moment. The mind is very powerful. The mind can become a superhero. The mind can become a supervillain. Your mind can be your ally. Your mind can be your enemy. I'm not joking. It's not something I'm saying. Like all wisdom traditions, they've spoken about this. So I would say that you can say, rather than our creator, Jeff, is trying to get closer in touch with us, we are an antenna, and when the antenna readjusts itself, the creator is always in the room. You know, it's as if God never left. It was man who left the heavens in the theological standpoint. Because in theology, we cannot ignore that man made a mistake. That means it's as if one human archetype messed it up for everyone. But the reason I'm saying this is because there is an important idea that God did not forgive man when he made a mistake in heaven, but when man on earth makes a mistake, because it is a trial, in some sense God is all forgiving. And the reason is, in Abrahamic texts, it is written, in certain Abrahamic texts, that God doesn't need man actually to preach truth, because God is truth. Do you see? And man was sent to this is from the theological lens, to my understanding of it, that man descended from heaven onto earth, and only through the approach of piety, through the garment of piety, garb of piety, he can in some sense elevate back to, you know, the heavenly dimension. So think of it this way. Think of all stories as portals. Stories are teleportable locations in the inner realms. You know, a person can hold a hammer and they're about to hit a nail and to, like, let's say, hang something on the wall, and the moment they raise the hand in the air to hit the hammer on the nail, they suddenly hear the lightning and they think like they are Thor from Norse mythology, you know? So the mind has an incredible ability, while we are living through a vision, to bring a side vision, and behind your eyes turn you into that, right? This doesn't mean I'm saying that divinity is ignorance. I'm saying that it's as if the truth never went anywhere. It's not as if God needs to come towards man. God is everywhere. Literally, through theology, God is the soul of man. That means people were like, yo, am I being a soul right now? You know, and they're like, yeah, you're being a soul. And the person's like, how am I being a soul right now? What is the soul? And the soul, in the monotheistic traditions, is the secret of the creator. That means you ask a religious person, what is the soul? And they will tell you it's God's business, none of your business. Blasphemy! Jeff says, I disagree. Something is filling my spirit. I've prayed and he came. I prayed and he came. The Bible gave me strength, and religions may be connected, but Jesus has come to he and brought me strength. Jeff says, I feel in my bones he's shaping me to do something powerful to help this world. He guided me here and has been on my heart my whole life. But you know, Jeff, I'll tell you something incredible. God is not a thing. Therefore, if it's not a thing, it's like a non-thing having a relationship with a thing. This is why I think in religious traditions, they were like, God is only in your heart. And the person's like, what do you mean, man? Isn't God in my brain? And then I would say, it's like, no, God is in your heart, because the heart is not a physical space. emotions seem to be from the nether worlds. That means I'm telling you, it's as if like 3 dimensions. 1 dimension, pure physical phenomenology. 1 dimension, semi-phenomenology, semi-numenology, and then 1 dimension, pure non-physical numenology. So what I mean by this is that there is a dimension where there is no body that exists. There is a dimension where only bodies exist, and there is bridging dimensions between these, and people create the bridges from the singular from the objective realms to the subjective realms differently. For example, there was a time where I felt the invisible other was God, from the religious context. There was a moment where it changed from God, and I felt it was a galactic archetype. I felt like there was, the extraterrestrial archetype, like the God archetype in my youth evolved to the extraterrestrial archetype. From the extraterrestrial archetype, it divided into the non-language based kind of intelligence, where right now I will tell you I have swam through language enough. Like, I have heard too many stories of how the world can be contained. So in some sense, direct experience is really, the only filter for truth. Language can be changed, can be manipulated, and the stories can be, in some sense, added. Pretty much think of it this way, that the mind has a sort of arithmetic. That means your mind allows you to add dimensions and to take away dimensions, to multiply dimensions and to divide dimensions. It's as if as Meister Eckhart says, the same eyes I see God are the same eyes God sees me. If God is by definition perfection, then perfection needs nothing from the imperfect. That means it's as if God doesn't need man. Man needs God. And when man needs God, the archetypes arise in the inner realms. Guys, every person has to have a different view on everything because they are occupying a different point in the space-time continuum. No human being, no 2 human beings ever have agreed to the same thing in the same way, through the same inner sight. Human beings should not forget that the world is information, and the forms that we are in change all the time. So the best way to kind of explain the world to, let's say, a new consciousness that enters it, is that you are in a changing system. If you choose to see yourself as a singular being, the options you have in life, the 3 routes you have, are the void, are the dual, and the infinite. If you choose to see yourself as a dualistic being, the paths that you have are the singular, are the void, and the infinite. If you choose to see yourself as an infinite being, the paths that you have are the dual, the singular, and the void. And if you choose to be the void, then all is within you. That means think of it as if like there's a passenger seat and there's a driver's seat. When you attain that that experiential driver's seat, rather than just being a passenger in existence, it's as if you move the moment. But if you're in the passenger seat, you still need some other idea other than yourself to drive your moment. So you will need gods, angels, demons, guides, stories of, the galactics arriving behind your eyes. Do you know what I mean? So like it's as if your mind can simulate reality. I forgot to mention something. So imagine every person has a relationship with the visible and the invisible, the known and the unknown. So I was saying that in my youth, because I was born in Iran, my relationship with the invisible was through religious ideology. Then at some point it turned to I should say before it was like it was as if like this. It was like first I was just a kid experiencing the world without any idea on it. Then a wave of information hit me, and I was the impression that there was a sort of divine will going on everywhere in the moment. Then from that I saw that the divine will was simultaneously being the expression of all of nature at once, a sort of Baruch Spinoza, Spinozian kind of God, where the God was just everything happening at once. It's as if, why is your neighbor mowing their lawn? Because God wants to, you know what I mean? Like, it was like that. It was like I had that sort of reasoning for the movement of the world. So it went from religion, I would say, I'll say it like this. It was first nature, then it was religion, then from religion it went to the concept of, through religion I had the impression in my inner realms that there were angels, there were entities. Then the entities I began considering if they were extraterrestrial. Then from the extraterrestrial I went beyond the language threshold. Then they just became the logos, a sort of invisible wind that's moving everything. From that I went to the consideration that what I was thinking to be the divine, what I was perceiving to be beyond the veil, to me right now, if somebody says, "Hey, Mr.Within, is there anything in your do you perceive any intelligence in your inner realms, unknown intelligence?" I will tell you right now, I don't believe in angels, aliens, or like just an invisible logos. To me, my future self is my spirit guide. That means to me, my God is the future of the corrected vision. That means if human beings, whether in a religious concept or not, the future is where we're going. That means it's like heaven is another word for the future. Do you know? From the theological lens. Do you know? And future is another word for heaven from the secular lens. If we live consciously, we can build paradise on earth. We can literally turn earth into a sort of temporary kind of tourist destination. To me, my vision is that an advanced civilization is a civilization where the grace of intelligence, rather than fighting or choosing sides of a multidimensional event, it embraces the whole event. That means we will only be truly an advanced civilization if we have an advanced observance and understanding of all events in civilization. And this cannot be a one-man thing, It's as if all the bees suddenly started to build the beehive the moment there was a queen bee, right? So it's the same for human beings. Our queen bee is the idea of the future greatness of civilization, the future advancement of civilization. So, Jeff, what I'm trying to tell you is that you can see God talking to you. You can see any sort of image. The idea is the direct experience. That means, let's say you're someone and you feel like, the Holy Spirit found you in a moment, and everything that was happening in that moment was the movement of the Holy Spirit, and there was no ego, no I thought, nothing. For a moment you felt you were God in moving the eyes of man. Even if a person, let's say, experiences that kind of state, I will tell you, the idea is not to build an ego around the concept of God. Do you know that in the Spanish Inquisition felt that it's how many people it killed? Do you know religious inquisition back in the day? Do you know Galileo was sentenced to house arrest? That means, let me tell you, truth isn't truth because somebody said it. Truth is truth because it can't be anything else in the experience. So Jeff, I'm reading your comments in the chat section. I'm telling you that rather than, okay, here guys, I'll just Jeff, I'll say this as the last as a last comment, and then I'll go back to the topic of the talk. Elon Musk had this ingenious approach to starting a business, where he's like, rather than seeing the business is going to succeed and 100% it has succeeded and law of attraction, Elon Musk took a realist approach where he was like, okay, let's assume that the business is going to fail. Do you know? Let's assume the business is going to fail, and we, every day of our life in that business, are trying to reduce the chance of failure. So it's as if a person has to have this mentality where I'm going to end up being a fool in this life just by the nature of how the simulation of the cosmos is designed, but every day I am reducing the percentage of foolishness. Do you see? So this way you're not afraid of the future's outcome. Do you know? When you acknowledge it. And when people are afraid of the future, they jump into extreme ideology. This is why they say, it's hilarious. Religion talks about possession, but religious ideology has possessed many. And what it is that possession is just where attention is stuck on. You can say if a person stares at a coffee cup their whole life, they're possessed by a coffee cup. You know? If a person just thinks everything is meaningless, they're possessed by the meaningless. You know? But when we realize we're a multidimensional experience of the realm, when we realize that it is time for whatever intelligence we are to perform, because guys, why else would we be individuals? That means the most simplest clue, the biggest clue to what the meaning of life is that it's an activity. Now we have two options. Either we consciously become active in the realm, or we unconsciously are active in the realm. Usually when a person gets tired, they become unconscious at the end of the day. And the final unconsciousness is sleep, right? So conscious activity is the most crucial thing. Conscious activity is the life lived. You know, there's this quote that I don't know who said it, but this scholar was like, some people, exist, but some people live. You know, something like that. You know, some people just merely exist, and that means they are not living. They're not being responsible for the totality of the intelligence that the universe has bestowed them at the moment. You know? And I'll tell you, there's a concept called theosophy, Jeff. And theosophy is in some sense the mankind's relationship with invisible dimensions. That means it's a school of thought that is looking at invisible dimensions. But I will tell you, eventually you will get bored. You will get bored of temporary truth. You will get bored of the impermanent. And then the attention will be like, in this impermanent reality of form, is life really information, like the point of it? And you'll see it can't be, because the information changes. So life has to be something more than just being in form, being information. Right? Truth cannot just be something you hear and that's it. It's a state, it's a dynamic state of conscious universalism. And so people are opening up. The concept of God is in some sense how would I say it? Religions have this theme where both polytheistic and monotheistic. One common theme that they have is the sacrifice of the past to be a new future. In Christianity, for example, it is the baptism idea, where it's in some sense the resurrection of the person in a different state of mind. Or that's what it was meant to be. I don't know what it is now. But like, there was an initiation into worlds where our attention was free beyond its sensory limit. We are not just a sensory-based creature, guys. The moment we notice that we have been watching the moment as like, it's like your soul is a sphere where your body and mind are in. Do you know? It's as if the soul is the universe. Our mind poetically is like the planet, and our body is limited to our individualism. Our body is our body. The mind is here to connect us to planetary consciousness. The soul is here to make us content with universal intelligence. That means it's I often tell people, like, you have to, when it comes to intuition at least, or shamanism, you got to pay attention to the clues in your moment. And a way a person can do this, to the signs in your moment. And a way a person can do this is actually being clearly aware of how far they can see, both in front of their eyes and outside of their eyes. I know how, like, the speed of my own thought. Any times in my inner realms a thought stream arises that is faster than I normally think, or normally thoughts arise to me, I know that there is a current, or the antenna has picked up a rhythm, It's as if we change the radio station and a completely different universe of a song is heard. And so if we can somehow, through the brain being a jar of neurochemistry, this jar that's holding this neurochemistry, anytime it moves, it's an alteration of consciousness. A person cannot live without changing. Right now, me giving this talk, it's as if like a chunk of my energy throughout the world, throughout the day is going to this, But the idea is that I choose to be selfless, so the energy doesn't affect the me within, in some sense. Imagine in the future an extraterrestrial lands, and it's a very chill and peaceful extraterrestrial, and the extraterrestrial's like, I don't get it. And we're like, what don't you get, extraterrestrial? And the extraterrestrial's like, I don't get why you human beings sleep. And we're like, what do you mean why should we sleep? It's like, we'll tell the extraterrestrial we sleep because we need to have energy. And then the extraterrestrial says, you don't get it. Everything is energy. That means if you sleep to get energy, it's as if like we haven't noticed we are in energy, but just in different forms of it, different transformations of it. The universe is happening as an event, and all knowledge is the symbolic translation of a direct experiential event. That means true learning is not in words. That means learning through language is just the beginning. It's just a certain station. Language is a very unique technology. You know what it is? Language is like an Iron Man suit. And, people live in this Iron Man suit, and as they get old and through the maturity of their own direct experiences, they eventually stop identifying with the Iron Man suit. I'm someone who, in 2016, completely stopped identifying with the Iron Man suit, but I like the geometry of the Iron Man suit. And that's why I'm talking about it. That means I feel the first wave, it's as if I feel I have already lived one life. Like I feel like in 2016, I lived a lifetime in this lifetime. I don't know how else to say it, After 2016, I got the privilege of being able to discriminate completely between my inner realms and outer realms. And there's a saying in ancient wisdom where they say the mind is a lousy master, but a great servant. And there's this other saying, I believe a man by the name of George Patton says this: you must serve before you command. So till 2016, I lived an inner life where I was serving my mind purely, just purely, as if I had decided that, the invisible was more important than the visible. And and if I tell, if I can be honest with the audience, these talks only started because one day I just had a feeling to go sit on a bench in a park and press the record button on the voice recording app. And I have no idea why that impulse was there. All I know that when I look back at the memories of how I have lived so far, there was only trust in the moment. There could have been nothing else. That means if we don't trust life, we stop evolving with the world. That's the danger of ignorance. You miss out on the faster dimensions of vision. All right, back to, the topic, the title. So pretty much, guys, what I'm trying to say is that we cannot understand infinity. We can experience it, though. Experience means watching reality move you, and you have the option of consciously being the pilot of your moment or unconsciously being a passenger of the world. That means either man makes a decision or the world will make a decision for man. And this is why we use our free will. Because freedom means there is space for novelty. And novelty means that the past doesn't have to be the way it is. That means if human beings realize that world peace or a state of advancement is an internal attitude shift rather than a physical, rebellion. It's as if we have come to the paradigm where inner rebellions will do way more than outer rebellions. Where every person has to rebel against the idea of why they have stopped caring for the world, if so. I have talked to people. I remember I was at this party and a philosophical conversation appeared. And there was a person there who suddenly, midway in the conversation, it was as if a cruel dimension from their inner realm stepped out, and the person was like, I hate people. Do you know? The person was like, I hate people. They don't see what they are creating, the ignorance they're creating. And so I'll tell you, it's super easy to hate the world. It's the easiest thing. The easiest thing in this life is to find an enemy, there's moments in life where this is why I say just to excuse me. This is I use the idea of the antenna, and the reason I'm sharing this, is because the antenna archetype fits in the religious narrative and fits into the non-religious narrative. From a secular lens, an antenna is a pretty secular object. From the religious lens, the mind is receiving the insight of the divine will, right? As if man ultimately is a witness of God being the world from the religious standpoint, you know? Swami Krishnananda says religion is God remembering himself. That means it's like the religious person thinks he's a religious person. It's like not the case. Religious people have stopped being human. That means they are God moving, right? This is why religious authority has been intense. People look at religion and they're like, man, the religions were so ignorant and foolish and they fought back in the day. I'll tell you, all ideological systems fight to keep their geometry in a changing world. It is so natural. But the reason people fought was because it's coming to the ultimate story of the world. What is the ultimate story we're telling ourselves? And people are looking for a story rather than creating one. The creation of a new story deserves way more applause than the past repeating. That means a person will suffer in the past and then they will get bored of their own suffering. What else can happen? Either those people help the person and their suffering lingers, or the person gets bored of the suffering. Once you're done with the past, you come to the present. The present is one of our first glimpses of universal freedom. That means imagine if the free will wasn't here, how ridiculous would it be? Like there would be no podcast. Guys, I'm going to share a story actually. This story, I believe it's in one of Rumi's poems. The poet Rumi speaks about how back in the day, 700 years ago, there was this very wise, enlightened individual, and in the Sufi tradition, those who were enlightened, they would say that person has the pearl. The pearl means that human being has witnessed the original earth, has found the original earth, or has found a true vision. So Rumi shares the story where there's this enlightened sage and he has a disciple, and back in the day life was hard, and so they were just traveling on horseback to get to a destination. They had to ride for days. Now people can call for an Uber. Back in the day, a person was like, bro, how many horses do I need to make the journey? And so the story goes like this, where the disciple and the sage are traveling, and they travel so far, they get tired, and they find this house, this very small house, in the middle of nowhere as they're traveling. They go to this house, and there's a woman, a widow, living there with her children, with 3 children, and they have this small, farm. And they have this one goat where they use the goat milk, and the woman would use the goat milk to go sell it and make money alongside the small farm they had. And so this widow allows the disciple and the enlightened sage to stay at the place. And the disciple looks at the enlightened sage, and they're not, of course, like billionaires walking. And so the disciple looks at the enlightened sage and says, Master, you have so much wisdom, and enlightened vision. Can you help this woman? Right? And the master sits down in a meditative position, says zikr, or zikr is another way of saying, gets a rosary and starts saying like a mantra. And the enlightened master steps out of the meditation, out of the the state, the trance state, and says the only way I can help her, that I am divinely authorized, is that the only way you can help this woman is that you have to go kill her goat. Just take that in. These two people are traveling. The woman was kind enough to let them stay there for the night. One of the disciples wants to help the woman who's like living a hard life, and the husband has died somehow. And the enlightened sage is saying, if you really want to help them, go kill the goat. And the disciple has seen the honesty of the, let's say, guru, so he knows the guru is not joking. And so the sage, the disciple is shocked. He's like, what do you mean? The goat is the only thing this, poor widow has, And the sage says, no, if you want to help her, you go kill her goat, and we have to leave tomorrow. And there's tears in the eyes of this disciple, but he decides to listen to the moment, and he kills the woman's goat, and they leave. And it's pretty messed up, right? Just think about it. It's pretty messed up. They kill the woman's goat and they leave. They leave and they go to this town, and they stay at this town for 10 years or some long time, and then they're moving back. They're going back to where they came from, and on the way, when they get to where the woman's cottage was, where the widow's cottage was, there it has become a giant city. Like, it has become a village. And so they're shocked, and as the sage and the disciple walk into this village, they see that where the cottage of the woman was this incredible house, and there's a huge farm and all of this, right? And as they're walking, of course, the shape of the disciple's face has changed, the shape of the enlightened guru's face has changed. It has been that long. And so when they go back, they see the woman is there, very happy, She has a new husband, and the kids have grown up, and the kids have done like different things. And, so pretty much the sage and the disciple runs to the woman and says, hey, what happened here? How did this place become a town, right? As if not giving away that if they were the people, right? And the woman says, I don't know, one night, two travelers came by, and they killed the only goat that we had and we were surviving on. Like the only thing we had to survive on. And bless those two. And this guy, the disciple, gets shocked. The disciple gets shocked how this woman is saying, bless those guys who killed my goat, And guys, this is an ancient story from 700 years ago. Please keep that in mind. It shouldn't be judged in accordance to modern times. It's like I'm sharing an artwork, Now, what happens is the woman says, when those two travelers came, those two cruel travelers, and they killed the goat, they, in some sense, forced the woman, the widow, and the children to have to come up with a different strategy than depending on that small strategy. And so after that moment, the woman had to go to a different town, a long journey to get a different work, and then the children had to, in some sense, street smart up, And so it was as if something that was providing them a very small vitality had to be let go of for something new to come. Right? Now, this doesn't mean we have to, indulge in animal cruelty to achieve the moral of the story, The whole idea of the story is that the moment you can't do anything else, the mind has to create a new dimension, because the mind rather exists in a new way than to not exist, right? So we rather exist than not exist. And if we are existing in a modality where the options are to either die or to update, right? So we would go choose to update. So sometimes, the best approach to have is that all systems can update. When I give these talks, I envision that there's people on the planet who can probably give the talk way better than me. That way my heart is at ease. There is no judgment when truth is out there. And At first, you want to hold knowledge. You see in the subtitle, guys, I've written, can sight even own anything? Right? We say we are individuals that own not only their own space, their property, and the stuff in their property, you know? We have to consider that if the mind is not an object and we are functioning under the idea, that means the concept of ownership is an idea, that means it's like the abstract is having as much of a weight as the real. Because that is honestly what law is. Law is, an invisible truth. For example, the laws of physics. We can't see gravity, but it is acknowledged that it's there. We can't see the wind, but it is acknowledged that it is there. How many invisible things are human beings acknowledging that are real? Like, there's a ton. Even the idea of self is like, abstraction taken seriously, taken physically seriously. The known self teaches us, then the known world teaches us, then or I should say differently. The known self teaches us, then the unknown self teaches us, the known world teaches us, then the unknown world teaches us. Because we should live a life where at the beginning of life knowledge is serious. Because at the end of everybody's life we're going into an unknown state. I mean, who can deny this? Both, religious, secular, whatever ideological system or whatever banner of thought a person, carries. We're all going to enter the unknown. And the unknown is like, if divinity is being considered to be the movement of the physical universe, then it's as if only the tip of an iceberg is moving. And true divinity is like the rest of the iceberg that we don't have access to. And it's not that we don't have access to, we can't identify as a thought that is based on just the biology. That means, imagine like a cell, a red blood cell, suddenly became conscious and was like, where am I? And the red blood cell realized it's in your body. Right? And then that red blood cell has an option, either to live as a red blood cell or any moment realize that it is being the body. So it's as if there are some people who die and there's some people who realize they are everything. So in some sense, everything cannot die. It can change, but it can't die. Death is just an exit out of duality, guys. It's not something to be feared, it's something to be understood. And the best way it can be understood is based on how we live. How much we care that life is important. And it's more important than ideological truth. You know how many human relationships have suffered because of ideological truth? You know how many wars on this planet has started because the inner realms could not accept the outer realms beyond themselves? That means it's as if, how many Hitlers in history could have been avoided if they in some sense the person had been a little bit humble. The person had looked at life and not considered superiority, I speak about the advanced civilization, but ultimately I know that this world is so big and it's moving in so many ways that the future will know itself in ways that man cannot even fathom, That means I am kind of like a memory of my future self right now. You know, and this may be an intense statement, but death can be said to be a future that is no longer in time. That means something nobody ever thought, the future is going to be timeless. And human beings, you know, they're killing each other over time. You know, I want to see the day where advanced communicators begin to roar. You know, it's as if I'm right now experiencing civilization 1.0, and civilization 2.0 is right around the corner. But civilization 2.0, it's as if there's going to be so many pilots arriving, and I'm like, let's build the airport before the pilots arrive. The advanced civilization is literally the most advanced probability of civilization. It's the genius chess move in history, conscious chess move. That means the world has been telling us what to do this whole time. For the first time, man has a voice in the cosmos. And without trust, how can life move? Like right now, I have to trust my biological existence to even be able to give this talk. Without trust, nothing can move. This world is a film. Where in our conscious waking state, we can be the director of how the actor moves. But in unconscious states, in deep sleep states, sometimes in automated dream states even, we are not the mover of the moment. The moment is moving on its own. Our consciousness is surfing the gigantic waves of the unconscious, and those who can become conscious of these intelligent rhythms, you study the simple dimensions of the system, or any system you find yourself for that matter, and the moment you study the simple dimensions, you become content with it, and you go on to the complex. You know, sometimes playfully, guys, I envision if I was teleported to another planet where there was another type of civilization, how would I live in that civilization? Sometimes my mind ponders this, and again, it's the same algorithm as I was mentioning. So guys, my attention is on the chat section. There's another question. Do you think the fallen angels are about to come to the light of this world? Okay. Religiously speaking, no. But in regards to the ignorant becoming conscious, yes, there's going to be giant waves of human psychology that's just going to multidimensionalize. It has no other choice. We either stay in one world or we walk in many. And what kind of civilization do you deserve? whole years of humanity. It is said that man discovered the future and discovered how the inner realms can divide the moment into three parts. And one part, it's like 2/3 of it, it's conscious, 1/3 of the moment is unconscious. The future we don't know, the present we know, and our past we've known. So 2/3 of every moment in time is known. That 1/3 is unknown. And the unknown is where art, divinity, and change are the same. You know, this is the equation. I'll write it here. Art equals divinity equals change equals truth. The unknown teaches us from within. The known teaches us from without. It's as if we are trying to fit a verb into a noun, and it's impossible when it comes to the nature of reality. So for the first time in human history, the psychology has to identify with a verb. And the only way you can identify with a verb is through the context. That means it's as if right now in civilization, we're like, I'm the same concept and I'm walking in different moments and environments and different contexts, right? But I'm saying that it's like it should be the opposite, where we are the context and everything in the moment is conceptualized. Right? The mind is the space of life. Objects and subjects are content of the inner viewer. The inner viewer is attributeless, so that leaves us as being the space where matter is in. So space is our soul. Our soul is a field of intelligence. Matter is our body, and how space moves matter is what the mind is. So how the invisible moves the visible, and the degree that that can be observed is being considered as the mind. So pretty much unknown intelligence moves known intelligence. Known intelligence wonders about how it's being moved, realizes it's unknown intelligence, end of all stories. That's when we go beyond the language threshold. And the species attains enlightenment, our species. You know, the human being, the Homo sapien, has a completely different destiny than all other species on this earth. As if sometimes when I look at birds on trees, I'm like, this simple creature has no clue how sophisticated humanity's vision is, right? And then I wonder, do human beings have a clue of how sophisticated humanity's vision is? Pretty much, when we wake up, we log in to a conscious user interface. The user of the interface is beyond the screen of reality. That means pure consciousness is being individuals. Right now, let's say I'm an individual talking, but I will tell you, it's like, how can energy be an individual? So if energy is being my consciousness, therefore the consciousness automatically is being reverted to a state where it has no condition, no shape. I want to go into a poetry tunnel, guys. Poetry tunnel is a part of these episodes where I just read poems I wrote. And I've written a lot of poetry. And here, I'll read it for the audience. Because why not, you know? The best thing that philosophy taught me is that anything is possible, because the possible cannot exist without the impossible. You know, it's as if philosophers are the guardians of civilization in the inner realms, and scientists are the guardians of civilization in the outer realms. Imagine, like, instead of the night watch, we have we have the human watch, right? Where there are individuals in life that they have only animated in this world to actually be stewards of the earth. You see, there's a strange honor in living for your whole world rather than just a part of it. And this is the honor, the universal honor that I find religious ideology, and it's not just religious ideology, it's just ideological systems separate the world, but the world is a collective movement. It's as if the religious person being like, God is love, but I hate my neighbor when he plays loud music, you know what I mean? We understand that truth is love, yet we do not love truth. Because if we did, it means we have to love truth's presence within everything. If the soul is God, do you see, is God in man, in some sense, every person is a soul. So when religious people are fighting each other, they're breaking God's creation. As if we are all the artwork of this master designer, this master creator. And this master creator's artwork is fighting each other. Can you imagine like an artist, and one day he wakes up and he sees his artwork are like fighting each other? You know what I mean? His paintings are literally ripping each other apart. You know, the artist is going to be like, oh my God, what kind of artwork did I draw? You know, can you imagine when human beings fight? God is like, what the fuck? That means it's as if it's like the creator is crying over its artwork, you know. So anyways, guys, I'm gonna pilot into this poetry tunnel. I wrote a book called Rahmana, Rahmana, and I want to read these poems that I wrote from this book. So let me see how many poems there are. There is 48 poems in this poetry work Rahmana that I wrote in 2016 actually. So there is 3 people listening. So out of the 3 people listening, anybody can choose a number and I'll read that poem. And if nobody chooses, I'll just read. So let's see. Let's start off with one. Okay, so this is the 7th poem, is called Do You Hear God? That's the name of the poem. The poem begins. Do you hear God? Do you hear God when she sings on the branch before the sun has opened his eyes? Do you hear God when words stop? Do you hear God when the water in your body dances with blood? Who has freed the concept from its ridiculous context? Do you hear God when the chair lies down on the ground? Do you hear God when the head of a lion roars from the inside? How does freedom open its wings? Do you hear God when you sleep? Do you hear God when your breath gets ready for cosmic liftoff? How does the road end when it never began? Do you hear God? If not, then the cosmos has already answered its own question. Angela in the chat section has chosen number 3. Let's read that. There's 3 viewers too. Number 3 is called Voids of Conscience. And guys, these books that I'm reading from, they'll be out soon. If people subscribe to the Project Mr. Within's library channel, like, they will see the updates for the library. Voids of conscience. The free man can give nothing to everything. Are you free or are you a man? Consciousness never lies to itself. Your origin cannot be a mistake. All leaders seek the leader within. When the storm comes to the edge of an untimely eclipse, billions of lions will roar through the same throat. When peace is no longer a stranger in the tavern, the heart finds no burdens. A burdenless heart works with the transparency of the ego. If God was a man, would he remember himself beyond mankind? The voids of conscience are within us all. So that's the end. The voids of conscience are within us all. You know, right now there's 2 viewers and 1 like. So I'm gonna read 21. Let's see what the 20. I'll make this the last poem of the poetry talk. The silence that kept going. Poem 21. What is a noisy truth that silence cannot bear? My beloved friend, could silence be the truth of all truth? How has honesty found the fingertip of madness pointing the wrong way? Some questions are here to dissolve all that can be dissolved. Did you know there is one sacred moment in creation? The cosmic smile is growing in our eyes, for when labs replace labyrinths, men are lost as much as mice. In the ocean, all drops are one. That's the truth, guys. That means really energy is just experiencing itself separate from itself. We are the universe. As the poet Rumi says, you are the universe in ecstatic motion. And the person's like, oh my God, my whole life I thought I was a person with a specific